Hey, friends. I am here to chat about something that nobody ever really chats about because that's what I do. All of a sudden, my throat is cracking, and probably because I haven't done a live. I guess I just did. I did a podcast live Friday. Anyways, hey, friends. Happy Thursday. I don't know how your week is going, but my week, whoo, Eric is out of town. I've got the kids to myself. I scheduled a dentist appointment this week. I scheduled a doctor's appointment this week. I had a tax appointment this week for my tax. Like, it's a lot for your girl who really tries to pace herself and goes a very slow pace. Um, Today we are talking about a topic that no one really talks about, and that is church. Okay, we're going to go there. We're going to go there in this episode. Before I get started, I will tell you I will be recording a podcast. So if you're here, say hi to me now so we can chat for a minute. And then once I start talking about the topic that I'm wanting to talk about, I won't be kind of communicating back and forth because it's for the podcast and I don't want my editor to have to cut all of it out because it makes him have to do a lot more work. So we got Pam in the house. Hey, Pam, thank you so much for joining us. I see someone else. Hey, girl. Hey. Listen, funny story. You guys tell me a funny story if you want to, but I'm going to tell you a funny story. So this week, I went to the dentist, and I meant to share this on Instagram stories, but that's how busy I've been. I haven't even been able to tell anyone this stuff and talk about it. So I go, and they had said it was going to be $80 for my cleaning. And I was like, did my insurance change? Like, is it not covering as much or what's going on? And they're like, no, that's for the nitrous. And I was like, nitrous? Do I normally get nitrous for a cleaning? And listen, this is my 6 month. Like, it's only been 6 months since I've went, so it's not like I haven't been for 5 years, which has been the case in the past. So I had this whole conversation. I'm like, no, surely I didn't need to take nitrous for a cleaning. Yes. This week I was a big girl and I did not need nitrous for a cleaning. I am doing better. And I haven't always had the fears of the dentist. Like, that came with a couple of very traumatic experiences involving a dentist. And then I would move and I'd get comfortable at the one dentist. And then we moved here and I hadn't quite gotten comfortable with this dentist, but I have now. The girl that cleaned my teeth, she couldn't believe it. I didn't need nitrous. She said normally they put numbing stuff on me as on my gums and stuff as well. And I was like, you do? Wow, I did really good. I did bring headphones to listen to some good praise and worship music because then, do not fear. God is here, that kind of thing. But anyways, which brings me to this topic that we're going to be talking about today. So we are going to go on and get started because I've been out here a long time in my office. For those of you who may be new here, this is my she shed. I don't have the air conditioning on yet because I'm like, it's not quite time. But this also turns into a hot box. And I swear it is probably 85 degrees in my office right now. And I got the windows open. I don't want to run up the electricity bill, even though my husband's not home and he wouldn't know. Anyways, okay, so here's the drill. I'm going to start the podcast episode and feel free to continue commenting because I will come back to the comments afterwards, okay? Are we all on the same page? All right. Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of Priorities on Purpose. I am your host, Melissa Batt, and I'm so excited to chat about something that I have been talking about, well, definitely since 2021 when God called me back to the church. And so we're going to be talking about going back to church, what that looks like, all the things. And I started thinking about this topic. Well, first of all, I've been having this ongoing conversation with several of my one-on-one coaching clients, those that are participating in this round of the Breakthrough Challenge. And so, without me saying, hey, I think God's calling you to go back to church, they have been feeling that tug to go back to church. And so, I have kind of volunteered my services to help them find a good church. And I thought, this is a really good, like, this is really good. This is something nobody talks about. And I'm going to dive in a little deeper besides just helping you find a church. And I want to talk about why there's so much fear in the church, like about going to church in the first place. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about rejection. We're going to talk about church hurt. We're going to talk about all the things. Okay. So if you are with me, I'm excited. Let's go. All right. So first, why do I feel like I have knowledge on this topic? Number one, I didn't grow up in the church. I did go to church as a kid. I don't know that I've ever shared the story on the podcast. So, fun fact, when I was little, I remember a vacation Bible school learning my first Bible verse and memorizing it, Matthew 6:8. Your Father knows what you ask before you ask him. That's how I remembered it. That's how I still say it today. And it's still because of my anxious heart. That is the verse that I have to repeat to myself all the time. I also, during the days of when I was a leader in 31, I even had that embroidered on bags because I needed that reminder. And so, Matthew 6:8, your Father knows what you need before you ask him. And this is going to go full circle. Okay, so remember that thought and then wait till what I'm about to tell you. Okay, so that was a VBS when I had to have been probably kindergarten or first grade. And then we moved to Gaston, Indiana. And when we lived there was a deacon from a little Baptist church up the road who would stop at our house and ask us if we wanted to come to church. And he bribed us with Totino pizzas. Totino's pizzas. Yes, he did. And guess what? We went. And so I have always had a passion for the youth because of this, because my mom didn't go to church. My mom and dad were divorced. My dad was gone all the time. Like, it was because of him stopping by and inviting us to church that I ever went to church in the first place. And while, yes, I eventually kind of went my own way in high school, my middle school years were pretty much involved in going to this church and eating Totino's pizzas every Wednesday night. And I eventually wrote him a letter and thanked him. It was so cool that I could go back because I moved. I'm not who I like, I lost touch with him. And it was just a really, really cool story how God like kind of brought everything back. His name was Cecil. And oh my gosh, there is a spider and it's huge. Oh my gosh. Hold on, look. Do you see it? Do you see that spider? Ah! Okay, hold on, you guys. We are live in killing a spider. This part will have to be edited out of the podcast. I got my shoe. Oh my gosh. It's funny because it's on a little note. And it's talking about the book of Joshua, live in victory. We are treading on serpents and scorpions. They are all under our feet. We have power over them. God has given us victory. We must do something, engage in the battle. We need to have the attitude of a warrior. Okay. Who is that for? I don't know, but this spider is for you. Oh. Okay. Listen, you don't ever just tap it. You gotta grind it in. I lost some of y'all already. Sorry about that. maybe I will have that. We'll leave that in now that I read that. This note, this is from when I lived in South Carolina. In every office and every move, I have still put this up here because it's so powerful. And it just reminds me that God gave us power. And so, okay, let me take a drink. So Cecil was a deacon at this church, in a full circle moment when I was able to write him a letter and thank him for serving me and my sisters and serving in the church and being the hands and feet of Jesus, even back then. And because of him, I now have this passion for outreach and evangelism and all that stuff. So I later ran into his daughter, and his daughter worked at a gas station where I lived. And she recognized our last name when we went to pay for something with our card, probably. Or maybe back in that day we were writing a check. I don't really know. But she was like, that meant so much to my dad. And then shortly after that, he died, and I was able to go to the funeral. And I mean, it was just a really cool moment. And that's a whole episode for another time, of those like defining moments, as Karen says, from my Wednesday night discipleship class that I'm in. Okay, so let's talk about church. So I didn't grow up in church, and so I have been to a lot of churches, and there are some that I have really enjoyed, and I felt like I grew in. And then there were some that like absolutely I just couldn't, it just wasn't for me. And we've also moved a lot over the years. So once I started attending regularly, we've moved. And so I had to start the process again. And it's really, really hard, when you call a church a home and then you have to start all over. It's just hard. If anyone move, you'll have to DM me and let me know, like, how hard it has been for you. The dentist, finding a new dentist, finding a new doctor, figuring out where your kids should go to school, all the things. It is hard for those of us who are what we would call transplants and are not from the area and stay in the same place. So I have researched a lot of churches, and so I kind of just do this naturally. Everywhere we move, I start and I do the same thing, even before we know we're moving. If there's even a general idea that we're moving, I start looking at churches. I'm like, okay, where are we going to go to church at? Because it matters. And I know that church is important for me, and it is important for my kids. Now, listen. In 2020, I stopped going to church because of the pandemic. Some of y'all probably may have also. And at that point, I was like, I don't even need the church. I'm growing more with my relationship with God than I ever have before. I don't even need the church. I'm sure some of you have probably thought the same, like, I don't even need the church. And that thought, while at the time I truly felt like I didn't need the church, I didn't realize exactly what I was missing. But because my friend Natasha was like, Melissa, you need to go back to church. Finally, I was like, I'm fine. I will try one more. And I've been at that church ever since. And so I'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to go through a few things on how to find a church. So if you feel like, actually, no, I'm going to back up. If you feel like God is calling you to go back to church and you are not doing it, first of all, delayed obedience is disobedience. And not only do you need the church needs you. And by what I mean by that is, there's a whole lot of people inside the church that's kind of going through the motions. They're what we would call Pharisees, if you know church speak and you've read your Bible and all that. The Pharisees are all about the religion, and they're going through the motions, and it's more about law versus relationship, and all of that. And God is doing something. He is waking people up, and in this, as he's waking people up and he's stirring their hearts, they are seeking him. And so the lost are coming into the church, and the church says God is responsible for the consequences. You're responsible for the consequences. Oh, that's really good. So Tammy is, she says, I got distracted. I'm not supposed to be looking at these yet. My pastor says God is responsible for the consequences of your obedience. You are responsible for the consequences of your disobedience. That's really good. I've never heard that before. So God is calling people back to the church. And if nobody like you and me are going back to church, the church will only be full of Pharisees. And the Pharisees are they rejected Jesus. And if they rejected Jesus, and these people are coming in hungry to learn about God, do you think they're going to learn about God and they're being the hands and feet of Jesus? No, they rejected him. And so I really, really want to tell you, if you're feeling that tug, be courageous. You don't have to do it fearlessly. You just have to have courage and be brave and trust that, just like I said in that Bible verse, Matthew 6:8, your Father knows what you need before you ask him. He will do it. He will supply you the need to get through it and maybe thrive there, or at least let you know what doesn't work so you can go try another one. Okay, so and this, again, this message isn't necessarily for, because I got a whole lot to say to the church people who are already in the church, but this message right here is more for the people that aren't going back, and they know that they've been called. Listen, you not only need to go back to church, but you need to be involved, because it isn't just about going through the motions. There's all kinds of people at the church already doing that. He's calling you to go back because he has work for you to do. The harvest is here and he needs workers. We are the workers. We believe in God. We trust God. But do we trust God if God's word says we should go to church and be in community with other believers, and yet we aren't going to church? And granted, church can look differently. It doesn't have to look like the way church looks, like going every Sunday. Like, I'm not getting into all of that. I'm just saying, traditionally, and I'm not about the religion and traditions, but traditionally, and what's most common, I should say, common is the best word. People who are feeling that longing to go to church typically go to church on Sundays, right? Maybe Wednesdays. And they go to the building that, is on their road or down the road or the closest or whatever. And that's why he is calling those of us who are believers back to the church. And we also have to talk about the reason why you're not going to church, right? We're not going back to church because maybe the church has hurt us. Listen, people hurt you. God did not. And that's really hard to kind of differentiate sometimes, but people are human and we all mess up. We all make mistakes. And so I think it's really, really important for you to recognize that you don't put the church on a pedestal, because the church isn't God. We are his people and he's working through us, but we still screw up. We still make mistakes. You can read story after story in the Bible of where people messed up. They didn't always do right. And while we should be striving to live a life of goodness and love and all the things, we sometimes get it wrong. And also, some of us the ones that are going through the motions, more than likely they're the ones that they're not being intentional. They don't even recognize that how they treat you as a newbie coming into the church. They don't even recognize that that could be the very thing that keeps you from coming back to a church. Rejection is a real big thing. And I'm currently reading a book. I just started it. A coaching client had told me about it. It's called Triggered, I think. Triggered or Triggers. And I'll put it in the show notes. It's really, really good. Already I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And it's biblically, like, they talk about scripture and stuff like that in there. It was my main concern because depending on who's talking about triggers, there's a whole lot of other things that can be said. And so it seems like very biblically sound from where I am and reading it. But triggers causes something in us. And if we've been rejected as a child, or we weren't accepted, or we were abandoned, or whatever kind, like, it's all trauma. And I've heard them talk about trauma as in like a little t and a big T. A big T is like the really big things like rape, sexual abuse, death. Those are big T's. The little T's are the things like, my dad never came home. Sorry, scratch that. He never came to pick me up after he said he would. I would sit on my couch, looking out the window on my birthday all day long, waiting for him to come get me. And he never showed up. Year after year after year. And well, right now, like, me and my dad, we have a great relationship. And again, he was working through his own things. I don't have any animosity towards him. He was struggling with his own things, and he did the best that he could do. So I'm not like holding that against him. And that's why I struggle with rejection or abandonment. But it's a real thing. And so once we're aware of it, we can recognize it and be like, okay, are they really rejecting me, or am I projecting that on them because it just reminds me of that feeling, like that emotion that comes up when I was, sad, sitting on the couch waiting for my dad. And every time a car drove by, I would be out looking out the window like, is that him? Oh, he's here. Nope, that's not him. That anticipation and just falling flat, right? And so we have to do a really good job of paying attention to the feelings that we feel, and then asking ourselves the questions like, why do we feel this way? Like, what is it? And recognizing that just because one person rejects you doesn't mean God rejects you. And it doesn't mean that the whole church rejects you. It may be one person. You may have misread the whole entire conversation. It may not have any conflict in it whatsoever. Maybe someone was just having a bad day. But even if that person truly rejected you, like, they are not Jesus, and you can't allow that person to be a stumbling block in where God is trying to take you. And that's what we do. Like, well, I can't go back there. So-and-so goes there, and I'm not dealing with that. You could still go and just not talk to the person, or you could, have a conversation and communicate, depending on where you are in the steps, like, that's a whole nother podcast episode. But what I'm getting at is, you can't let what one person does, or even, let's say, I've been to church over and over and over, and everyone just dismisses me. Nobody sees me. Nobody acknowledges me. Yeah, that is a problem. That is a problem. And especially in the church, there's a whole lot of people that are in the church going through the motions and don't even recognize their own sin, right? And so in that's a problem. But what about the other people that are going to be coming into that church, and they need to see someone like you that sees them? Like if you don't go, it's just like stopping, the dominoes. You have all these dominoes set up, right? Well, let's say that the dominoes are people coming into relationship with God and growing their faith, right? Inside the church. And so you're going and all of a sudden you stop going. And then so all of these are dropping. But once it gets to you, no more dropping. They don't drop because you are not doing your part, and you could be doing your part. And so I consider myself a misfit in the church. I think we're all misfits, but some of us know it and some of us do not. And so I look for the people. And again, I'm human. Sunday, Easter Sunday, I wanted to get there early. I wanted to look for the new faces or people that I didn't know, anyone that looked lost. I ended up running late. I didn't get to do that. And I remember I walked right in front of somebody who I didn't recognize. And I didn't realize it till I got to my seat. When I got in my seat, I could just feel the conviction of God just being like, you shouldn't have done that. You should have been like, hey, do you need help finding a seat? That kind of thing, instead of just walking. Like, I didn't just like cut them off, but I just was like, oh, they're probably looking for someone. I'm just going to keep going. And so I've been like, are you looking for someone? Let me see if I can help you find them. Anyway, we're all humans. We're all doing the best we can do. But when we can be intentional and actually see people and be the hands and feet of Jesus, lives are changed. And God is visible to everybody because their needs are being met. And so if you're not in church, I want to remind you that it is important, even if you don't view it as important. Just because you don't view it as important doesn't mean it's not important. It is important. And God wants to use you in the church. And well, yes, I was growing my relationship with God a lot when I was not in church. My kids weren't. My husband probably wasn't. And when all hell broke loose and I ended up like in the lowest of lows, I didn't have anybody. I had no community locally. And I think that right there in of itself is so important. We need local community of believers so that when things go bad or things are like really hard, we have people that can lift us up. I've talked about this in the past, when I had a hysterectomy in South Carolina. It was my people that came and helped me because my family couldn't, because they were helping with my stepdad who had stage 4 cancer. And so again, community matters, and the church should be a place where you can find community. If you can't, become that. And instead of looking at it and like, okay, well, this isn't the church for me. If that's the only thing missing in that church that you're a part of, maybe that is God calling you to start some kind of community. Go to your pastor and say, hey, can we have something where, I invite people to get together, or just start making friends, make small talk. I'm not a small talk girl, but I can compliment someone's shoes because I spot them right away because I love shoes and I love jewelry. And so whatever you can do to engage in conversation, put your phone down. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so now that I've said all of that, the spirit of offense is something that is running rampant right now, where we all get offended really easily. And I think that we do need to do a better job of recognizing that's what it is. I talked in a podcast episode Fridays, Good Friday, that I did an episode on Good Friday. So it released, I don't know when, but I think Friday. In that episode, I talk about the spirit of resistance and the spirit of comfort. A spirit of retreat, I think, is actually what it is, where you just want to stay in your comfort zone. And resistance and the things that God is trying to do, the enemy is trying to get you to resist and not do those things, because they know that it is going to grow your relationship of God, like with God, and also be beneficial to you in the kingdom work that he's calling you to do. And so recognize the spirit of resistance, the spirit of retreat or comfort, and the spirit of offense. Like, if you get offended easily, start praying against that. Recognize that that's what it is. You should not, if someone doesn't look at you and smile and you're like, oh my gosh, why do they not like me? Like, you need to have some people praying for you, because that is more than likely not because they don't like you. It's because they're in their own little world. They didn't even see you, and they can't like you or dislike you if they didn't even see you. And again, the church's mission, I think, is to be the eyes, the hands, the feet of Jesus. And so they need to see you, but there's always going to be some people in there that don't see you, and you can't let that rob you of what God is trying to do in your life. So pray against those things. How do you find a church? When God says you need to go back to church, what do? How do you get there? How do you go from just staying in this fear of like the fear and the paralysis analysis of like, but I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go. So then you don't go, or you don't want to go alone. I get that. I have helped 3 coaching clients recently go back to church because they felt that tug, not because I told them, although one I did probably. One of them I definitely was like, I think God's calling you to go back to church. You've got to go back to church. It's time. But in that conversation with her, like, I thought she went back right away. And then later she's like, I still haven't went. And I was like, what? Why haven't you went? And she's like, Melissa, like, I don't even know where to start. And so I looked for her a church and found one for her to go to. I gave her a list of like 5. And I've now done that for 3 coaching clients and a breakthrough challenge member. And so here are some of the questions I asked. Like, what kind of church do you think you would like? Is there a specific denomination you're looking at? If there's a denomination, like, excuse me, some of them are very similar. Like, I grew up in a Baptist church. Then I went to a Methodist church. I got married in a Methodist church. And then somehow we ended up at an Assembly of God. And so Assembly of God and Church of God are very similar. And then there was another church that we went to that was neither of those, but was very similar to those. So like you can DM me and I will help you with this. Okay. Because again, I'm not getting into all the theology and like this or that, like wherever you feel comfortable. And the most important thing is like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you want the music to be like? Do you want traditional hymns? Do you like upbeat music? One of the things that I was like, this is a must have. I want the music to be so loud that I can't hear myself sing. Because if I can hear myself sing, that's all I'm going to think about. And I'm going to be super insecure. And I want to sing and I want to worship God. And I don't want others to I don't want to hear myself sing because I can't sing. I'm tone deaf. And so that right there, that was one of my requirements. I wanted something where they had things for children. That was really important to me. At one point in time, like we would drive up to 30 minutes to go to a church. And that's, like I always will ask, like for that criteria, like how close does it need to be for you to go? And again, like I would drive up to 30 minutes for a good church, but it's really cool when it's only like 5, right? And so that's one thing I ask. How big do you want a mega church, or do you want like a super intimate, a group of 20, a group of 50, somewhere in the middle? And some of these questions you may not know until you go. And that's okay too. If you're like, I've never even been to church. I don't even know what to expect. I don't know what I want. Best thing to do is ask your friends. Ask on Facebook, hey, I feel like I'm or Instagram, I'm thinking about going back to church or going to church. Where do you go? And can you tell me about it? Or could I go with you? Um, that is how one of my Breakthrough Challenge members ended up going back to church. And she sent me a message on Easter Sunday saying, "Oh my gosh, I did it. I went by myself and I loved it." And again, you sometimes you just have to ask. And so again, you also have to know, like, okay, so I got through those questions. Let me tell you some of the other things I do, because for some reason I'm an out of the box thinker. I think it's just because I'm nosy and I have anxiety sometimes and I need to know all the things, because these are the things that are going to trip me up. I'm like, what are they wearing? What do they wear? Like, do I need to wear a dress? Do I need to wear a skirt? Is everyone dressed up? Can I wear my jeans? Like, these are the questions I ask myself when I'm going to a new church. So this is what I do. Excuse me. I will look and see if they have any live stream episodes of their church. A lot of times you will find a live streaming on Facebook or YouTube of the church, sometimes even on their website. I definitely check out their website because I want to know, like, do they have small groups? I want to know the name of the pastor. I want to know the children's director or whatever. Like, I want to know all these things. And then I also go and I stalk their social media accounts because I want to know what the pastor thinks and likes and what kind of person he is before I ever step foot into the church. And the same thing with the children's director or the children's minister. I want to know who's going to be having my kids or responsible for them if I want my kids to be left without my supervision. A lot of times I would make Eric go, and I know this is one of the ways that, because I am married and I can boss my husband around a little bit. Like, a lot of times I could get him to go first and then he would tell me if he thinks I would like it. And then I would go. But not all of you can do that. So there are some other things you can do. Look and see if you haven't, like, you can go to their Facebook page and it will show who's liked or follows their page, and see if you know any of those people, and then being like, hey, do you go to this church? What do you know? Like, ask the questions, get curious. I know when I had first moved, obviously I didn't have any friends in that area. You can, if you're moving for a job, ask the people. Like, I did that. When we moved to South Carolina, the first church we went to was where his boss went. Didn't work out so well because when we switched churches after I came there, because that church was like a little too much for me. They fired him. That's a whole nother story. But not there's a lot of things that you can do, looking at the church, listening, like, what kind of praise and worship music. If you want traditional hymns, a lot of times they're live streaming that, and you can listen to the live stream and know what kind of music they're playing, what people are wearing, how long the services are. Do they have Sunday school and regular church? If they do, that doesn't mean you have to go to both, because there's a lot of people that don't do the Sunday school, but they just come for regular church. Do they have like a Wednesday night service? Do they have a youth program? You're going to find all that out by doing these things, going to their social media accounts for the church and going to their website if they have a website, and do not judge them if it is not perfect, because a lot of times, depending on how big the church is, it's volunteers that are putting the website together, because most churches don't have money to hire people to do that for them, because they're using that money for, keeping the electric on, water for the church, paying someone to clean the church, those kind of things. And so don't hate on them if their website is a little messy. It could be. That doesn't mean it's not a good church. It just means they need more money and more volunteers and more people in the church. And so those are some of the things that I think has been super helpful for me when it comes to finding a church. And again, if you try one, like, there was one that I absolutely loved, but my kids didn't like. And so then I was like, okay, well, let's try this other one. And so we went to another one, and we all liked it, but it was so big. And I know, because I've been to a lot of different size churches, that I want to be able to talk to my pastor. And this church, the pastor didn't even shake hands at the end of the service or anything like that. And I want to look eye to eye every once in a while. Like, I'm not one of those that's going to stand and have an hour-long conversation all the time, but I want a church where the pastor knows my name. I've been to small churches, and sometimes the small churches, like there was one church that we went to in South Carolina, and it was super small. I had never been to a church that small, except for the one where, Cecil, the deacon, would come pick me up for the pizzas. And that church was like home for me for a really long time. And what I found was it was very small, and I realized most of the church was comfortable being small. And I know that there's a whole lot of people that need Jesus, and I'm not comfortable being small. I want to be in a church that's willing to grow, because I think that's what God calls us to do. And I want to be the hands, like I want to serve. I want outreach. I like all of that's really important for me. And so the church that we're at now, I remember it's funny because it was the jail ministry that really sold me. And because of the pandemic, I still have not been able to go to the jail ministry and be a part of that. But I felt like that was something that God was calling me to do. And so one day I am going to be doing that. But I don't know what happened, but they hadn't opened it back up since the pandemic. And hopefully they will do that soon. But again, like, look for those kind of things. And then once you get there, talk to people. I know it's scary. I'm an introvert with anxiety. I know it can be scary to go into a new church, but look for someone with a smiling face and friendly eyes, and just be like, oh my gosh, this is like, tell them it's your first time. I don't know if anyone else does this. I can't believe I'm going to say this. Sometimes when I'm in a city that I'm like, I literally am a tourist, okay? Like, let's say I was in New York City, or I was in Panama City Beach. That's where I went on vacation last time. I never want to look like a tourist. I want to look like I live there. Why? There's no shame. Why can't I just be a tourist? Why can't you come into the church and not know where everything's at? Because, for crying out loud, it's the first time you've ever been there. That's okay. Why are you putting shame on yourself for this being the first time you're inside this church? You don't have to. Drop the shame. My passion is to help you drop the shackles of shame. And shame shows up in so many different ways, and I will be talking about shame a whole lot more. But right now, I just want to say, like, do not let shame hold you back from making the first move, going to the church in the first place, or looking for someone with friendly eyes. Surely there's someone at the front door to greet you and saying, hey, I am new here. I'm super nervous. Like, acknowledge the elephants. Just tell people. I know at my church, if you were to come and you would be like, I am new here, like, I'm pretty sure the first thing they're going to do is find someone to be like, hey, do you want to give her a tour? Let's show her around. Absolutely, they would do that because they want to make you feel at home. And so don't be afraid to ask where the bathrooms are. Don't be like, I remember when Eric and I first started dating, Eric went to church. I did not. And so I had to ask, I remember asking someone I worked with who I would have considered churchy, like, because I didn't go to church at that point. And she did. She like wore skirts and everything. And I loved her. She had long hair, always had it in a bun, wore skirts. And I loved her. Her and I like talked quite a bit. And I was like, he's inviting me to church. What do I do? And what do I wear? And all these things. And, because I was willing to ask those questions, I like was more comfortable because I was aware. So don't be afraid to ask the questions necessary. Call the church and say, hey, do you have something for kids? Do you, if you have someone with a disability, ask. There's a lot of churches nowadays, and I really hope that ours will do this soon, and have something for special needs children, so that moms and those who are raising those children can be fed as well, because they still need the community. And a lot of times they feel like they can't go to church because nobody can watch their child because of the special needs that's required to be met. And so, again, that's what this episode is about. Do not allow your struggles, your past. Yesterday, I'm going to wrap up with this because this has been a really long episode. Yesterday after church, I parked behind the church in this big parking lot because I was running late. Some things are hard to break. And in that, like, there was this whole group of kids that were out there playing basketball, and because there's basketball goals there. And I had actually asked our youth pastor yesterday, I was like, so when are we going to get those youth kids to come? Like, why aren't they coming into church? Is anyone inviting them? Like, what's going on with that? And so when I left, there was probably 20 kids out there. And again, I don't want them just to come to church for the sake of going to church. I want them to come to our church to have their needs met, because Jesus is in the building. And while Jesus is everywhere, I know, like, they're going to see the hands and feet of Jesus, and people are going to love on them and help them feel loved and appreciated and valued and worthy and all of that stuff. So I went up and I was talking to him, and there were some very eclectic kids. Like, you could tell some of them were a little rough. Some of them were not your average churchgoer, I would say. And I'm not saying this to gosh, I've already got myself into a mess. How am I going to even finish a story? So there was this one boy who, I'm assuming, maybe in the process of, maybe he's transgender. I don't know. I didn't ask. He just told me his name and we talked. Like, I didn't know to call him a she, so I'm just going, it was a guy. And he had makeup on and his ears pierced. And but he still had like super short hair. And he was dressed like a guy. So that's why I think, I'm not quite sure where that is. That's where I'm at in the story. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have all the details. But in this conversation, I was talking to him and I was like, so why don't you come to church? Like, you guys are hanging out in the parking lot. Why don't you come in? And he's like, that building, or what did he say? He would the fire would take me out immediately. Like, basically, he's no good to the church. The church can't have him. He would be knocked dead on the spot walking in the doors because he's so bad. And it broke my heart because I'm like, no. And I remember my grandma, and you can go back to, I think, episode 18 on the podcast, where I talk about the relationship with my grandma and me being able to help her know Jesus before she died. And my grandma used to say it because I would invite her to church. I'm like, hey, grandma, you want to go to church with us? She was like, I can't go to church. That whole place would fall down and catch fire if I went in there, because she felt like she was so bad. And that, it broke my heart to hear those words again from this kid who, you could tell that just the way he talked, there's a lot of brokenness in his life. He's in foster care. He's aged out. I don't know all the other situations, but that right there, he doesn't have a family, so to speak. And so, and that's just from what he told me, not that I'm assuming, just in case we have some people on here who want to go there and think that. That's just what he had told me. And so in that, though, it just broke my heart, because I'm like, no. That, no, you are welcome. You're welcome too. It's not just for people that look like me. In fact, there's a lot of times when I felt Like, it wasn't for me because I didn't have it all together. And God doesn't call us to have it all together to come into the church. We need to look at the church as for the broken people. We are all broken. And just because some of our sins and some of our struggles are more available for the public to see than others doesn't mean that the other stuff isn't there for the other people. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Anyways, this episode has been really long. I'm going to go now, but I want to tell you, if you've been feeling the call to go back to church, friend. It will be the best thing that you have ever done because God is doing something in the church. The revival is here. And if the revival is here, he needs more workers. And you and I, as believers, because this message really is for the believers who just like, the church failed me. That's who this message is for. Like, you need to go back to church because the church may have failed you, but that needs to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is if people like you and me start going back to church so we can show up and be the church for those who are learning about God for the first time and are coming into the doors hungry, lost, and broken, and just need someone to see them. All right. That is it for this episode, y'all. Let me know what you think if you're still here. I'm reading comments now. Boundaries. God will never reject you. Absolutely. I know I'm guilty of being the person that probably offends people because I'm in my own lane and don't see others like I want to. Pray about that. See, I should have done that. Check to see what they wear. We went to a church in California and I was the only female in pants. I will admit they were still very cordial to me. Good. Yeah, we went to one of the churches here. I had no idea because we knew people that went to that church and they wore pants. So I was like, okay, well, if they wear pants, everyone else wears pants. No, apparently they still wear skirts to church. Like, they can wear pants, but not to church. They all went to the bathroom when they got to the church and put on skirts. I didn't understand it, but they were really nice to me still too, and very cordial and all the things. But that really did happen. I will say that I even go to the point of sometimes I don't like Easter, especially. Like, I really feel convicted to not dress up. I wouldn't say conviction, that's a strong word, but there have been years for sure where like I felt convicted of really dressing up a lot for church because I know that some people that are wanting to go to church, the only excuse they have is I don't know what I would wear. And I don't want that to be the case. And so I love that my church is kind of an everything goes. You pretty much wear what you want. Some people are dressed up more. Some people are dressed down. Everything goes. And even Sunday, our pastor was in jeans. He had a dress shirt on and a blazer, but he was in jeans. And I think some people, like, I don't want it to be because of what they're wearing that keeps them from coming in the doors. So anyways, that's it for this episode, y'all. I am like dying of thirst and I am so hot because this room is really hot. I will chat with you guys later. Oh, wait. Hold that thought. One more thing to say. Can't believe I have it in my notes. Actually, I didn't write this part down. The Breakthrough Challenge is coming up. So the Breakthrough Challenge, let me look at my board. We are in week 12, right? What is today's date? 13th. We're in week 11. So in 2 weeks, we will be starting a new workshop talking about the 12 weeks of success plan that I teach based on a book by Brian Moran called The 12-Week Year. My version is a little bit different than his, but it's based on that book. So I read that book and was just fully like inspired to do this. And I've been teaching it for a while now. So I will be teaching a workshop on that and goal setting in that area. And then After that, you can sign up to be a part of the challenge. And that is where for 12 weeks, we do group coaching. I help you with your plan. And your plan doesn't have to be all business related. In fact, I actually encourage everyone to not have all business ideas and goals. So, if you have a business and you want one to be business related, or one related to whatever your industry or job is, your occupation, you can, but it can be very much about marriage. It can be about your relationship with God. It can be about money. It can be about organization, like your health. All goals count, no more than 3. And I always tell those that have the business goals, they have to have one in there that is not business related, because I coach overly ambitious women, and they all can think of all of the goals and all the things they want to do for their business or their nonprofit or whatever, because they're very driven. And the things that are most likely to be neglected is their marriage, their own health, their relationships with others. And so we've had several actually have goals to go back to church this round. And next round, I know we have some that have goals to only because we have done that. We did an intensive. Breakthrough Challenge members were invited to an intensive that I did. And so some of them already have all their goals planned for this next round. And so some of them coming up, like to love on their husband. They're going to write like love notes to their husband every week. Some of them are going to, decluttering is a big one every single round, eating more clean, going back to church, getting involved in their community. Those are just some ideas. One girl, she is going to climb a mountain, and that's super cool, and I can't wait to cheer her on in that. And so how we do that, because it's not about just having the goal, but it's actually creating the plan, and we do that inside the workshop that I do. And the workshop is completely free. So again, I want to encourage you to get signed up for that. I will put a link here for a link for the book that I'm currently reading about triggers, and then a link to sign up for the next Breakthrough Challenge, because I'm telling you, whether you're in business or you're just doing life, and if you're breathing, God ain't done with you yet. You're living life, whether you're existing or living. I want to help you get to living. And once you're living, like there are things that God's calling you to walk out, and I want to help you do it. And so that's what this challenge is. It's the Breakthrough Challenge. And the challenge starts May 1st. That's week 1. But we will be doing the workshop the week before. So I think it is the 24th starts the workshop where I do the free training. So go check that out with the link and get signed up. We will do all those trainings inside the Real Talk Tribe community. And that's my free Facebook group. And okay, I think that's it now. I'll talk to you guys later.